When plantation archives from the Savannah River Valley were finally unsealed in 1983, archivists uncovered something that shattered every long-standing assumption about Antebellum, Georgia. A single cabin on the Hartwell estate, home to a woman identified in the ledgers only as a Mulatto Rose, contained architectural features that defied the brutal logic of slavery. Hand-carved moldings, a brick fireplace trimmed with decorative ironwork, real glass windows draped with curtains, and a locked trunk filled with possessions no enslaved woman should ever have been allowed to own. The discovery posed questions officials refused to address for decades. What investigators found inside that cabin in 1851 revealed a conspiracy reaching into the highest tiers of Georgia society, a web of deception so intricate that 5 men died attempting to protect it. And the truth behind it all was so unsettling that surviving members of the Hartwell family eventually paid to have the documents sealed again. Before we continue the story of Rose and the cabin that served as both her prison and her weapon, we need you to join this investigation. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and comment where you're listening from. Your engagement helps us uncover more forgotten mysteries like this one. Now, let's return to a humid spring morning in Burke County, Georgia, when everything still seemed painfully ordinary. The Hartwell Plantation spread across nearly 2,000 acres of fertile land hugging the Savannah River, about 20 miles southwest of Augusta. In 1851, it was among the most prosperous estates in Burke County, producing cotton, tobacco, and rice through the labor of 143 enslaved people. The main residence stood on a slight rise, a 2-story Greek revival home with white columns that caught the morning light. Magnolia trees lined the long approach, their waxy blossoms perfuming the air every spring. Thomas Hartwell had inherited the plantation from his father in 1843. At 38, he was considered a progressive planter by the standards of his peers, meaning he preferred psychological manipulation over the whip, though he never hesitated to use violence when he felt it necessary. He kept immaculate records, attended church without fail, and served on the county agricultural board. His wife, Caroline, daughter of a prominent Charleston merchant, brought refinement and valuable social ties into the marriage. They had 2 children, Richard, 14, already being groomed to oversee plantation operations, and Anna, 11, who spent her days practicing needlework and studying French. The enslaved community lived in 2 rigid rows of cabins behind the main house, identical single-room structures with dirt floors and gaps between planks that allowed rain and winter wind to seep through. Each held between 6 and 10 people. The fireplaces were crude, made of mud and sticks. Weekly rations consisted of cornmeal, salt pork, and molasses. Work began before sunrise and ended when darkness made labor impossible, with slightly shorter hours in winter. Hartwell allowed them Sunday afternoon for themselves, a gesture he considered generous. But one cabin stood apart. It sat at the end of the western row, set off from the others by 30 feet or so. From a distance, it looked no different, but up close the differences were undeniable. The wood was newer, the roof better tended, the door straight and solid on its hinges. A small vegetable garden grew beside it, something no other cabin had. Most striking of all was what wasn't there. No clustered children, no constant chatter, no shared life. Only one person lived inside. Rose had arrived at Hartwell Plantation in the summer of 1848, purchased at an estate sale in Augusta. The seller's ledger described her as mixed-race female, approximately 18, house-trained, exceptional appearance, no visible scarring. Thomas Hartwell paid $850 for her, nearly triple the average price for a young enslaved woman assigned to domestic work. His wife had not gone with him to the sale. The others on the plantation noticed Rose immediately. Her skin glowed like warm honey in sunlight. Her features were fine, and her hair fell in loose curls when it wasn't tied back. She moved with a grace that felt cultivated rather than instinctive, and she could read, a fact revealed when she was seen studying the labels on medicine bottles in the main house. Her speech carried no trace of a regional accent, suggesting education or time spent among white families in a northern city. Hartwell initially assigned her to work inside the main house, sewing, mending, light cleaning, but within 2 weeks, he abruptly changed her duties. Rose would now live in her own cabin and perform specialized tasks for the family. The nature of those tasks was never explained. She no longer appeared regularly in the main house, yet she was never sent to fields. She received clothing finer than any other enslaved woman, pieces clearly chosen individually rather than distributed in bulk. Her weekly rations included foods others never even saw: white flour, fresh butter, ground coffee, white sugar. Whispers began within a month. Some enslaved women claimed they saw Thomas Hartwell visiting Rose's cabin after dark. Others said that Caroline Hartwell's expression tightened whenever Rose's name surfaced. The overseer, a German immigrant named Claus Fischer, appeared to have been instructed never to enter Rose's cabin or lay a hand on her for any reason. When a field hand made a crude remark about Rose within Fischer's hearing, the man received 15 lashes and was sold to a plantation in South Carolina within the week. The isolation would have crushed many, but Rose endured it with a calm, unreadable expression. She spoke rarely, and when she did, her tone was measured, polite, and precise. She joined no gatherings, formed no friendships, and took part in none of the quiet acts of solidarity that helped the enslaved endure the oppressive system around them. To the others, she became a ghost, a beautiful enigma drifting between her cabin and whatever unspoken arrangement bound her to the master. But Rose was watching every moment. She studied the rhythms of the plantation. When Fisher made his rounds, when Thomas Hartwell met with neighboring planters, when Caroline took her afternoon rest, when the household staff gathered to gossip, she noted who wielded real authority and who only performed it, who could be trusted and who would trade secrets for favors. She was constructing a map, not of land, but of the estate's hidden architecture, the invisible machinery of fear and control that kept the system intact. And in her cabin at night, lit only by the small oil lamp Hartwell had provided, Rose wrote in a journal she kept hidden beneath a floorboard she had loosened with careful precision. The journal was a perilous possession, yet Rose understood that the most powerful weapons were often the ones dismissed as harmless until the moment they were used. On the morning of April 3rd, 1851, Caroline Hartwell did not appear for breakfast. This was unusual enough that Thomas sent one of the older house servants, a woman named Dinah, to check on her. Dinah knocked on the bedroom door, received no reply, and stepped inside to find Caroline lying in bed, eyes open, fixed on the ceiling. She was breathing, but she did not react when Dinah spoke her name. A doctor was summoned from Augusta, a ride of nearly 2 hours. Dr. Samuel Winthrop had attended the Hartwell family for 15 years. He examined Caroline thoroughly while Thomas waited rigidly in the hallway, hands clasped behind him. After half an hour, Winthrop stepped out with an expression of practiced concern. A nervous condition, he explained, brought on by anxiety and possibly an inadequate diet. She needed complete rest, reduced stimulation, and a tonic he would prepare. Thomas accepted the diagnosis immediately. In Georgia in 1851, women's ailments were routinely attributed to fragile temperaments, and physicians knew how to offer explanations that soothed husbands without inviting further inquiry. But that evening, after the doctor had left and the house had settled into an uneasy quiet, Thomas made an unexpected decision. He sent for Rose. She arrived at the back entrance just after sunset, entering the house exactly as instructed. Thomas met her in his study, a room crowded with books he rarely touched and agricultural journals he studied obsessively. He closed the door behind her. "Mrs. Hartwell is unwell," he said, tone carefully neutral. "She requires care beyond what Dinah can provide. You have a gentle manner and a steady hand. You will attend to her during her recovery." Rose kept her eyes lowered. "Yes, sir. This is a position of trust," he continued. "You will sleep in the small room adjacent to her bedroom. You will see to her needs, administer her medicine, and report any change in her condition directly to me. You will not discuss this arrangement with anyone. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir." Thomas studied her for a long, quiet moment. Something flickered across his expression. Calculation, or perhaps poorly restrained fear. "Caroline has been under strain," he said. "She has been saying things that are not rational. If she speaks to you of matters that are confused or fanciful, you are not to repeat them. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." He dismissed her with a gesture, and Rose climbed the stairs to the family quarters. The small room he had mentioned was barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand, but it had a window and a door that locked. Compared to her cabin, it felt like a luxury. Caroline lay motionless on her bed, her pale hair fanned across the pillow, her hands folded loosely atop the coverlet. Her eyes were open, but they did not follow Rose as she entered. "Mrs. Hartwell," Rose said softly, "I am here to care for you." For a long moment there was nothing. Then Caroline's gaze shifted slowly, focusing on Rose's face. When she finally spoke, her voice was a thin whisper, yet the words made Rose's blood run cold. "He killed her. You look just like her. He killed my sister, and now he has brought you here to remind me." Rose kept her expression composed, but her thoughts raced. She had never heard any mention of Caroline having a sister. Among the enslaved community, the Hartwell family history contained no such tragedy. "You should rest, ma'am," Rose murmured, lifting a cloth dampened with lavender water. "The doctor says you need your strength." Caroline's hand shot out, grasping Rose's wrist with startling strength. Her fingers were thin but unyielding, and her eyes, suddenly sharp, held none of the vacant haze from earlier. "You don't understand," she whispered fiercely. "He will do the same to you. He cannot stop himself. I have tried to warn others, but they put me in this bed and call me hysterical. You must leave this house. You must run while you still can." Before Rose could reply, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Caroline's grip fell away instantly. Her expression dissolved back into emptiness. Thomas stepped inside, carrying a glass of dark liquid. "Her medicine," he said, offering to Rose. "Be sure she drinks it all." Rose helped Caroline sit up just enough to swallow the mixture. It smelled strongly of laudanum and bitter herbs. Within minutes, Caroline's eyelids drooped and her breathing slowed. Thomas watched her until she slipped fully into sleep, then motioned for Rose to follow him into the hallway. "As I said, she speaks irrationally," he said. "You are to ignore anything she says that does not concern her immediate comfort. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." He descended the stairs. Rose returned to the small room beside Caroline's, and she did not sleep. She sat in the dark, listening to Caroline's steady breathing, thinking about a dead sister no one had ever mentioned, about Caroline's terrified warning, about the strange shift in Thomas Hartwell's voice whenever he referenced his wife's claims. Something terrible had happened in this house, and whatever it was, Caroline Hartwell believed it would happen again. The next morning, Rose began searching for answers. She had long been taught how to move through white households without drawing attention, how to glide, how to be unnoticed, how to exist in the periphery where danger often passed by without fully seeing her. Now, as she tended to Caroline's needs, bringing trays of food that went largely untouched, changing linens, reading softly from devotional texts, she let her eyes wander. The Hartwell home revealed itself in layers. Downstairs, the public rooms radiated a curated respectability. Charleston furniture, pastoral paintings, a polished piano where young Anna practiced every afternoon. But upstairs, the private rooms told different, disquieting stories. Caroline's bedroom held a locked cabinet Rose had been explicitly forbidden to open. Through a narrow gap, she glimpsed what seemed to be letters bundled with black ribbon. On the mantel stood a daguerreotype in a silver frame, angled so that it faced the bed. The image showed two young women in identical dresses, their features nearly identical, sisters unmistakably. One of them was clearly Caroline, perhaps 10 years younger. The other woman shared her face, so precisely that the resemblance was almost unsettling. Her features, though her hair was darker and her expression more solemn. Rose waited until Thomas left for a meeting with his cotton factor in Augusta. Caroline slept under the heavy fog of her medicine. The house servants were occupied with their routines. Quietly, Rose lifted the daguerreotype from its frame. On the back, written in faded ink, she found the words, Catherine and Louisa Peyton, Charleston, 1839. Louisa, the sister Caroline had spoken of. Rose returned the daguerreotype to its frame and moved toward the lock cabinet. She had learned lock-picking years earlier from an enslaved man in Virginia, a master carpenter before his capture, who had quietly taught several women skills white owners assumed they could never learn. The lock was a simple mechanism meant to deter casual curiosity rather than determined hands. Inside, Rose discovered the letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Catherine, written in a graceful, confident script. She chose one at random. Dearest sister, I write with news that will no doubt surprise you. Mr. Hartwell has asked Father for permission to call on me formally. You know my reservations about plantation life, but he appears sincere, and Father believes in an exceptional match. I confess a measure of excitement despite my hesitation. Please tell me your thoughts. Your loving sister, Louisa. Rose read several more letters, watching the gentle arc of a courtship unfold. Louisa Peyton had been engaged to marry Thomas Hartwell in 1841. The letters described wedding preparations, Louisa's fears about leaving Charleston for rural Georgia, and Catherine's encouragement of the match. Then they stopped. The final letter was dated November 7th, 1841, just 2 weeks before the planned wedding. Louisa wrote about last-minute arrangements and her nerves about married life. There was no hint of trouble, no foreshadowing of tragedy. Rose searched every inch of the cabinet but found nothing else. No explanation of Louisa's fate, no obituary, no announcement of the wedding's cancellation. It was as though the young woman had simply ceased to exist after November 1841. She replaced every item exactly as she found it and locked the cabinet again. Caroline stirred in her bed, murmuring in distress as the drugs pulled her between sleep and waking. Rose dampened a cloth and laid it across her forehead. Caroline's eyes fluttered open. "Lou," she whispered. "No, ma'am," Rose said softly. "It is Rose." Caroline's face twisted with grief. I should have stopped her. I should have told her what I suspected. But Father insisted it would be different with me. That Thomas would not. That I would be safe because I was less beautiful than my sister. Rose leaned closer. "What happened to Louisa, Mrs. Hartwell?" "They said she drowned. An accident." Caroline swallowed, trembling. "Thomas took her for a carriage ride along the river on a warm autumn afternoon. She insisted on walking near the bank, despite the mud. She slipped, they said, fell in. The current carried her away before he could reach her. They found her body 3 miles downstream, tangled in roots." Her voice grew hollow. Everyone claimed Thomas was inconsolable. Father believed him without question. And 6 months later, Thomas asked permission to court me instead. A cold ache settled deep in Rose's stomach. "You do not believe it was an accident?" "I was 15 when Louisa died," Caroline whispered. "I grieved for 2 years. Then, when Thomas began calling on me, I found her diary. She hid behind a loose brick in the fireplace of our shared room. She wrote about his possessiveness during their engagement, his jealousy when she spoke to other men, his demands that she sever her Charleston friendships. She wrote she intended an engagement, that she feared him, that she did not know how to refuse without disgracing our family." Caroline's voice sank to a barely audible thread. The last entry was dated November 6, 1841. She wrote, "Tomorrow Thomas is taking me to see the plantation land he purchased near the river. I will tell him I cannot marry him. I pray he will be gracious, but I fear otherwise. If anything happens to me, let me know I did not go to that river willingly." Rose felt her breath hitch. "You told your father?" "I tried," Caroline whispered. "He said I was imagining danger where none existed, reading too much into the fears of a nervous girl. He said Thomas had witnesses. He said searching for conspiracy would bring only pain. Then he burned the diary. Her voice tightened, and he strongly encouraged me to accept Thomas's courtship for the family's sake. Our finances were strained. An advantageous marriage was necessary. The realization fell into place with terrible clarity. Caroline had been offered, sacrificed, even, to the man who might have murdered her sister, all to protect the Peyton family's social position. She had lived with that knowledge for a decade, bearing his children, running his household, pretending their marriage was normal. Why tell me this now? Rose asked. Because you look so much like her, Caroline breathed. The same coloring, the same features. Thomas saw at the moment he purchased you. I knew what it meant. He is recreating her, reshaping you into the version of Louisa he can control absolutely. A woman who cannot say no, cannot leave, cannot tarnish his reputation. And when he tires of you or when you threaten him, you will vanish, just as she did. Rose wanted to believe this was the unraveling mind of a woman driven to madness by grief and suspicion. But she couldn't. She had seen the way Thomas Hartwell watched her, how he isolated her from everyone else, how he granted privileges that were not kindness but curation. She was not a slave, not in the traditional sense. She was something more horrifying, a living replica crafted to fulfill an obsession rooted in murder. In the weeks that followed, Rose continued tending to Caroline while discreetly investigating the Hartwell family's past. She knew that useful knowledge often hid in unexpected corners, and that enslaved people typically understood more about white family secrets than the whites ever realized. Dinah, the older house servant who oversaw the kitchen, had worked on the Hartwell estate since Thomas's father was alive. She remembered Louisa's single visit to the plantation before death. Pretty girl. Dinah said one afternoon as she kneaded bread dough, her gnarled hands moving with practiced efficiency. Pretty but nervous. Kept looking around like she expected something terrible to happen. Master Thomas was all smiles and sweetness, but I've seen that kind of smile before. My first master smiled like that right before he sold my children. Did you see them together? Rose asked softly. Did he seem angry with her? Dinah cast a quick glance toward the door to ensure no one was within earshot. I was serving refreshments in the parlor when they spoke. Miss Louisa said something about wanting more time before the wedding, maybe waiting until spring instead of December. Master Thomas went real still. That's when I knew she was in danger. Men like him don't hear the word no very well. She resumed kneading, her jaw tight. And the day she died, he came back alone, soaked through, hollering for help, said she fell in the river. The men searched for hours. When they found her, her dress was torn, like maybe she'd been fighting something or someone. But the doctor said drowning can do terrible things to a body, and nobody questioned after that. Rose also approached Fisher, the overseer, though carefully. German immigrants occupied an odd place in Georgia society. They were white enough for authority, yet foreign enough to be viewed with suspicion. Fisher tended to speak more plainly than a southern-born overseer might have dared. Mr. Hartwell gave me very specific instructions when he hired me. Fisher told her one morning as she walked past the barn where he supervised repairs. I was never to allow Miss Rose to work in the fields, never to discipline her, never permit any male slave to approach her cabin. He said it was because of your refined nature. Fisher shook his head. But I've worked many plantations. These orders, they're not about refinement. They are about possession. Rose lowered her voice. Has he done this before? Kept an enslaved woman apart like this? Fisher's weathered face tightened. There was another woman before you came. Lived in that same cabin for nearly a year. Then one day Mr. Hartwell said she'd been sold to a plantation in Alabama, but I saw no bill of sale. And when I mentioned her to a trader who comes through here regular, he said he'd handled no such transaction. Fisher rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't ask more questions. In this line of work, some questions are dangerous. A chill moved through Rose. She was not the first. Another woman, Someone who likely resembled Louisa had been isolated, controlled, then erased without a trace. At night, in the small room beside Caroline's, Rose wrote everything she had learned. The journal had grown thick with observations, quotes, patterns, suspicions. She was gathering evidence, though she wasn't yet sure what she could ever do with it. Enslaved people had no legal standing. They could not testify against whites. Anything she revealed would be dismissed as the lies of an ungrateful slave, and she would be punished, sold, or killed. But Rose understood something crucial. Power did not always come from laws or violence. Sometimes power came from knowledge that others desperately needed to keep buried, knowledge that, if managed correctly, could be turned into leverage. Catherine's condition gradually improved, though Rose suspected the change came less from Dr. Winthrop's tonics and more from the act of confession. Each time Catherine unburdened herself, some weight lifted from her spirit. "I have tried to be a good wife," Catherine said one afternoon as Rose brushed her hair. "I gave him children, managed his home, entertained his associates. I believed and foolishly hoped that if I performed my duties perfectly, he would forget Louisa. But now I see I was never the one he wanted. I was simply the one he could command after Louisa refused him." She stared at her reflection in the mirror, jaw trembling. "Have you ever thought of leaving, Rose?" Rose didn't answer. Catherine let out a bitter laugh. "Where would I go? A married woman has no legal existence apart from her husband. He controls every dollar, every piece of property. If I fled, he would retrieve me, and my children would be taught that their mother was insane. I carry his name, but I am no freer than you. Society simply pretends my cage is prettier." This was a truth plantation mistresses rarely admitted aloud. Their bondage, perfumed, gilded, draped in silk, was still bondage. They were ornaments meant to produce heirs and maintain social respectability. But beneath the lace and etiquette, they were as disposable as any possession. Rose was still thinking about these parallels when Richard Hartwell knocked on the bedroom door. Thomas's son had grown into a lanky 14-year-old with his father's angular features and his mother's pale hair. He had been raised to see enslaved people as instruments, yet Rose had seen the way his eyes lingered on her. Curiosity in conflict with something like moral discomfort. "Mother wishes to see you," he said stiffly. "Father has returned from Augusta and requests your presence in his study." Rose descended the staircase with outward calm, though a cold knot formed in her stomach. Whatever Thomas wanted, it would not be harmless. He was seated behind his mahogany desk when she entered, pretending to study a ledger. He did not acknowledge her immediately, a calculated display meant to assert dominance. After a deliberate pause, he closed the book. "Rose," he said, "Dr. Winthrop informs me Catherine has improved significantly. He credits your attentive care." "Thank you, sir. He also tells me Catherine has been talking more, saying things of medicine has loosened." His gaze fixed sharply on her. "I wonder what she might have said during these conversations." Rose kept her features smooth and unreactive. "She speaks of many subjects, sir. Often the words are confused. The doctor says it is normal in recovery from nervous disorders." Thomas rose and walked to the window, clasping his hand behind him. "You are an intelligent woman, Rose. Far more intelligent than most in your position. That can be valuable." He paused. "It can also be dangerous. Intelligence without the wisdom to know when to remain silent can lead to unfortunate consequences." The threat was unmistakable, clear, though veiled behind polished civility. "I understand, sir. Do you?" He turned fully toward her. "I wonder." His eyes lingered on her face with unsettling precision. "You see, I have made inquiries into your past. The man who sold you at that estate auction offered rather intriguing details. You were educated in a northern household, were you not? A Quaker family in Philadelphia, one of those who believe in teaching their servants to read and write. Highly irregular." Rose kept still, though her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She had never told anyone about her time in Philadelphia, about the family who had nearly treated her as a daughter before financial ruin forced them to sell her south. That part of her life was supposed to be gone forever, lost, invisible, untraceable. These Quakers, Thomas continued, his tone tightening, fill slaves' heads with dangerous ideas. Equality, liberty, rights. His mouth curled. Ideas that have no place in a properly ordered society. He stepped closer. Rose could smell tobacco on his breath, an expensive cologne clinging to his shirt. I paid a premium for you, Rose, because of your appearance and your refinement. But if I believed you were carrying northern agitation into my home, sowing discontent among my property, or worse, feeding my wife fanciful delusions, then I would consider that investment deeply disappointing. He stopped only inches from her. Catherine's sister died in a tragic accident. That is the only truth that matters. If my wife has suggested anything else, it is merely the ravings of her illness. And if you were to repeat such fantasies to anyone at all, I would be forced to conclude that you are an ungrateful and dangerous element on this plantation. His voice dropped to a hiss. Do you know what becomes of dangerous elements, Rose? Yes, sir, she said quietly. Good. He returned to his desk and opened the ledger again, dismissing her with a flick of his hand. You may go. Rose climbed the stairs slowly, her mind racing. Thomas knew she had been asking questions. He had probably spoken with Dinah and Fisher already, perhaps even threatened them. He was tightening his grip, warning her that exposure would be met with brutality. But his threats revealed something else. An innocent man would not need to silence witnesses. An innocent man would not dig into her past to find weak points he could exploit. Thomas Hartwell was guilty, and he was growing desperate. That night, Rose could not sleep. She lay in the small room beside Caroline's, listening to the house settle around her. Through the thin wall, she heard Caroline's breathing, steady for the first time in weeks. Around 2 in the morning, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Rose froze. The steps stopped outside Caroline's door. Silence followed, long, suffocating silence broken only by the slow tick of the grandfather clock downstairs. Then, finally, the steps retreated, descending the staircase with eerie quietness. Rose rose, silently, and moved to the window. A figure crossed the yard toward the slave cabins, a lantern swinging in his hand. Even in darkness, she recognized the silhouette. Thomas Hartwell. Go into her cabin. Fear clenched her stomach. What was he searching for? If he found her journal, the pages containing everything she'd uncovered, she would be dead by sunrise. She had to get there first. Rose slipped from the room and hurried down the back stairs, the ones used by the house servants. Outside, the night was hot and damp. Magnolia scent hung thick in the air, mixing with the darker smell rising from the river's swampy bottomlands. Cicadas shrilled in waves, masking her footsteps. She reached her cabin just as Thomas lifted the latch. He had not yet lit the lamp inside. He stood in the doorway, lantern raised, scanning the shadows. She had only seconds. If she stayed hidden, he might discover the loose floorboard. If she confronted him, she risked punishment for leaving the main house. She chose a third path. Mr. Hartwell? She called softly from the dark, as if emerging from another cabin. Is something wrong, sir? Thomas spun toward her voice, his face twisting briefly with anger before he smoothed it into controlled politeness. Rose, he said tightly, what are you doing out here? I woke and remembered I had left my sewing in the cabin, she replied. Mrs. Hartwell will need it in the morning. I didn't wish to disturb you at this hour for permission. It was a flimsy excuse, but it made her presence appear accidental, not suspicious. Thomas studied her intensely, searching for deceit. I see, he said finally. I came to ensure your cabin was secure. There have been reports of prowlers in the area. The lie was obvious. Slave cabins had no locks, and planters did not conduct nighttime inspections. But the performance continued. That is very thoughtful, sir, Rose said. As you can see, everything is in order. Thomas stepped back from the doorway. Indeed, return to the main house at once. And in the future, if you need something from your cabin, ask during the day. It is not safe for a woman to be out alone at night. Yes, sir. Rose walked away calmly, feeling his gaze burning into her back until she rounded the corner. Only then did she let herself tremble. It had been too close. 30 seconds slower, and he would have found the journal. But the encounter revealed something vital. Thomas was hunting for evidence. He suspected her. The crisis was no longer approaching. It was already here. Rose slipped back into the main house through the kitchen and climbed the stairs. Caroline was awake, sitting upright with terror in her eyes. "I heard footsteps," she whispered. "Was it Thomas?" "Yes," Rose said softly. "He went to my cabin." Caroline's face went white. "He knows you've been asking questions." "Rose, you must stop. He will kill you. I have watched this pattern before. When Thomas feels threatened, he acts quickly. That is how Louisa died. She told him she would not marry him, and within 24 hours, she was dead." "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I cannot watch this happen again." Rose sat on the edge of Catherine's bed, breaking every rule that separated mistress from slave. "Mrs. Hartwell," Rose said quietly, "I need you to tell me everything you remember about the day Louisa died. Every detail, even the ones that seem too small to matter." Catherine wiped tears from her cheeks. "Why? What good will it do?" "Because knowledge is power," Rose replied. "Even for people like us. Especially for people like us. If something happens to me, if I disappear, like the other woman Fisher mentioned, someone needs to know the truth. And you need someone who believes you are not insane." Catherine sat silent for a long moment, staring at her hands. At last, her voice steadied. "Louisa came to visit the plantation in November of 1841. Thomas wanted her to see her future home before the wedding. Father and I accompanied her. Improper for an engaged woman to travel alone with her betrothed. We stayed 3 days. On the 3rd day, Thomas suggested taking Louisa on a carriage ride to show her the extent of property, including the riverlands he'd recently purchased. Father approved. Thomas was nearly family at that point. I wanted to go with them, but Thomas insisted he wished to speak privately with Louisa about their future. Father thought it romantic. I thought it ominous. But I was only 15. Her fingers twisted the bed linens. They left mid-morning. Father and I expected them back by dinner. But late afternoon came, and they had not returned. Father began to worry, and just as he prepared to send men out searching, Thomas arrived, stumbling into the house, dripping wet, incoherent with grief. Rose listened, heart pounding. He said Louisa insisted on walking near the river despite warnings about the muddy bank. Catherine continued. He claimed she slipped on wet leaves and fell in. The current was strong from recent rains. He said he jumped in after her, but couldn't reach her in time. The water swept her away. "You didn't believe him?" Rose asked. "Not entirely." Catherine shook her head. His clothes were soaked, yes, but they were also torn in several places. He had scratches on his face and hands that looked more like a struggle than a rescue. And when he described Louisa falling, he said she screamed his name as she went under. But Louisa was an excellent swimmer. We spent summers at the shore. She swam fearlessly. It made no sense that she would drown in a river unless something prevented her from swimming. "What did your father say?" "He believed Thomas completely. Men searched the riverbanks and found Louisa's body the next morning, miles downstream. The doctor confirmed drowning. No sign of foul play. The funeral was held in Charleston. Thomas performed the devastated fiancée beautifully. 6 months later, he began courting me, and Father encouraged it. He said I shouldn't let my sister's accident keep me from securing a good match." Rose considered this timeline, her mind spinning. "Did anyone examine the place where Louisa supposedly fell?" she asked. Father and several men went the next day. They said the bank was muddy and dangerous. There were marks of a slide into water, but no one checked whether they were caused by someone being pushed. And no one questioned Thomas's torn clothing. He claimed he snagged himself on branches while trying to save her. It was plausible enough. And I believe Father did not want to look deeper. Our finances were failing. We needed the marriage connection. If Thomas had killed Louisa, it would mean scandal and lost opportunity. It was easier to accept tragedy than face ruin. The coldness of this, of valuing reputation above the lives of daughters, hit Rose like a physical blow. White society had its own brand of bondage, its own ways of turning women into commodities. Mrs. Hartwell, Rose said softly, I need you to do something for me. If I vanish, if Thomas says I've been sold or that I ran away, I need you to tell someone the truth. Tell them about Louisa. Tell them about the other woman who lived in my cabin. Tell them about Thomas's obsession. People may not believe you. They may call you mad, but you must speak. Silence protects him. Catherine gripped Rose's hand, her thin fingers unexpectedly strong. I will speak. I promise. But please, Rose, be careful. Do nothing to provoke him. If we are quiet, if we are obedient, maybe he will lose interest and we will survive. Rose didn't believe this for a second, but she nodded. Catherine needed hope, false or not. As dawn seeped through the windows, Rose heard Thomas moving downstairs. Another day of pretending normalcy was beginning, but Rose had made her decision. She would not wait for Thomas to act. She would not let him choose the moment of violence. She would force his hand, but on her terms. She had one advantage he didn't know about. The most dangerous enslaved people were not those who fought openly. They were the ones who understood their masters' minds well enough to predict them. Thomas Hartwell had killed before. He would kill again. Rose intended to make sure the next death would not be hers. 3 days later, she put her plan into motion. She had spent those days being perfect, silent, dutiful, never giving Thomas a reason to suspect her. She had even staged an innocent moment in the hallway, allowing him to find her reading the Bible aloud to Catherine. Harmless, pious, docile. It worked. Thomas seemed calmer, convinced his earlier threats had subdued her. But Rose had been planning every moment. She knew Thomas's habits intimately now. Every Thursday night, he met with his cotton factor and 2 neighboring planters in his study. They spent roughly 2 hours discussing prices and shipping schedules. They drank whiskey. They smoked cigars. And during those 2 hours, Thomas Hartwell let his guard down. The men were jovial that night, their laughter echoing through the hallways. Catherine retired early as she always did on Thursdays, taking her dose of laudanum and falling into the heavy sleep it guaranteed. On Thursday, May 22nd, Rose waited until she heard the men's meeting in full swing, voices rising, glasses clinking, smoke drifting through the foyer. Then she went to Catherine's room and administered the usual amount of laudanum. Catherine would sleep deeply until morning, safely unaware of what was coming. Rose descended to the kitchen, where Dinah was washing the last dishes from dinner. Mr. Hartwell has asked me to bring fresh coffee to the study, Rose said loudly, making sure the other house servants heard. It was crucial, a public explanation for her presence near the study. She prepared the tray, but also something else. From beneath the loose floorboard in her cabin, she had retrieved her journal. Every observation, every whispered confession, every detail recorded in her clear handwriting. She had wrapped it in oilcloth to protect it and tied it securely. She balanced the tray and knocked on the study door. "Enter," Thomas called. Inside, 4 men sat around his desk. Thomas himself, John Crawford, who owned the neighboring plantation, Robert Hayes, the cotton factor, and William Preston, an Augusta merchant. They were in high spirits, discussing rising cotton prices. "Ah, excellent," Thomas said, gesturing for her to place the tray. "Gentlemen, this is Rose, who has been caring for my wife during her illness." The men barely acknowledged her, just as she expected. To them, she was not a person. She was a background fixture. Perfect. She poured each man a cup, her hand steady, then stepped back to the wall like a shadow. Conversation rolled on. Irrigation systems, supply bottlenecks, tobacco shipments. After 10 minutes, she spoke softly. "Mr. Hartwell, may I return to Mrs. Hartwell?" He waved a hand dismissively without looking up. Rose left the study, but she did not go upstairs. Instead, she slipped out the back door and into the night. The moon was veiled by clouds. The yard was nearly pitch black. She moved quickly, avoiding patches of lantern light, until she reached her cabin. She retrieved the oilcloth-wrapped journal from its temporary hiding place and headed toward the western slope of the property, toward the Savannah River. The river was swollen from spring rains, its surface a roiling sheet of black water. Rose stood at the bank, calculating distances, currents, probabilities. This was her one chance to shape her own story. If Thomas killed her, he would hide her body, claim she'd run away or been sold. The enslaved community would know the truth, but their voices meant nothing under Georgia law. Catherine would try to defend her, but she would be dismissed as unstable. Rose's death would vanish like smoke. But if something else happened, a disappearance that demanded scrutiny, Thomas could be forced into the light. She bent and placed the journal at the base of a cypress, carefully positioned so it could be found by a search party, but not immediately obvious. Then she removed her shawl, tearing it deliberately and catching strips on low branches. She scuffed the mud, dragging her heel to make signs of slipping or struggling. She crafted a narrative in mud and torn fabric. Rose had gone to the river at dusk. Something happened. A fall or a fight. A disappearance. A body taken by the current, as had supposedly happened to Louisa 10 years earlier. But unlike Louisa, Rose would leave behind evidence. A journal full of truths powerful enough to destroy Thomas Hartwell. If Thomas found it first, she would die before dawn. But if anyone else found it, the sheriff, a patroller, even a suspicious neighbor, Thomas would not be able to hide behind plantation decorum. Questions would come. Investigations. Rumors. Scandal. Rose wasn't sure who she could bring down, but she was certain Thomas would never again control the narrative completely. She returned to main house and stepped into the kitchen. "Dinah," she whispered, "tomorrow I need you to do something important." The older woman looked up sharply. "What is it, child?" "If I am not at breakfast, tell Mr. Fisher you saw me walking toward the river at dusk tonight. Tell him I looked strange, that you called out and I did not answer. Will you do that?" Dinah's weathered face went still. "You're planning something dangerous." "I'm planning to survive," Rose said quietly. "Will you help me?" After a long, aching moment, Dinah nodded. "I'll tell Fisher. But child, whatever you're doing, be careful. That man upstairs, he is not like other masters. Something is broken inside him, makes him more dangerous." "I know," Rose said. "That's why I can't wait for him to act." She climbed the stairs back to her small room. The rumble of men's voices still drifted from the study below. She removed her shoes and lay on her bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her plan again and again. The greatest risk was the journal. If Thomas found it before sunrise, she would not live to see another hour. But she had chosen the hiding place carefully. Visible enough to be found by someone searching the riverbank, subtle enough to escape a casual glance. And she had filled the journal with details that would be dangerous for Thomas to destroy. Names, dates, verifiable events. If the journal disappeared after she disappeared, the absence would itself be incriminating. Her second risk was apathy. What if no one cared, even after reading it? Enslaved, testimony meant nothing. Rumors meant little. But Rose had written in formal, educated English, with clean grammar, logical structure, and references to events white men could verify. She wrote not like property, but like a witness. And a witness could not be ignored, not easily. Rose closed her eyes. Dawn would decide everything. Credible to white readers. She had framed Thomas's crimes not as her opinions, but as documented observations, details that could be verified through records, witnesses, timelines. Most importantly, she had included Louisa. Catherine's sister had been a white woman from a respected Charleston family. Her death, if proven murder instead of misfortune, would matter to white society in a way Rose's death never could. The journal linked the two cases, revealing a pattern impossible to dismiss. Rose heard the men downstairs finishing their meeting, voices booming with whiskey-warmed confidence. Chairs scraped. Farewells were exchanged. Thomas would soon come to check on Catherine, just as he did every night. She closed her eyes and slowed her breathing, slipping into the steady rhythm of feigned sleep. Footsteps entered the hallway. Thomas's voice drifted softly through Catherine's door. "Rest well, my dear." More footsteps approached Rose's small room. Her door opened slightly. Silence. Rose kept her breathing even, her eyelids perfectly still. After a long moment, the door closed. She waited until the house fell completely silent, until she knew Thomas had retreated to his own bedroom at the far end of the hall. Then she rose and glanced out the window. The grounds were still, dark, waiting. Tomorrow everything would change. Either Rose would die, or Thomas Hartwell would. There were no other endings left. She lay down again and, unexpectedly, slipped into a deep sleep. Rose woke to shouting. The sun was barely cresting the horizon, but men's voices were raised in alarm outside. She rushed to the window. Fisher was sprinting toward the house, his face flushed. Behind him, enslaved men were emerging from their cabins, startled by the commotion. Catherine appeared in Rose's doorway, trembling. "What is happening?" "I don't know, ma'am." "Stay here." Rose hurried downstairs. Thomas was in the front hall, pulling on his coat with a look of tightly controlled concern, an expression carefully constructed to appear responsible, not guilty. Fisher barged through the front door, without knocking. "Mr. Hartwell, sir," he panted. "Dinah says she saw Rose walking toward the river last night, acting strange. We need to search the riverbank. I fear she may have—" "May have what?" Thomas snapped. "Run away, sir. Or worse. The river is high. If she went too close to the edge—" Thomas's jaw tightened. Rose watched the calculations flicker behind his eyes. If this was a real emergency, he needed to respond correctly. If it was a trap, he needed to act the part of the concerned master. "Gather the men," Thomas ordered. "Search the riverbank immediately. If she has drowned, we must find the body quickly in this heat." Rose stepped forward from the shadows. "I am here, Mr. Hartwell." Every head turned. Fisher exhaled in relief. Thomas's expression twisted. Surprise, certainly, but also a shadow of something darker. Disappointment. "Rose," Thomas said slowly. "Dinah reported seeing you near the river last night. I walked after delivering coffee to your study, sir." Mrs. Hartwell was sleeping peacefully. The night air was pleasant. "I went toward the river to think and pray. If that was improper, I apologize." Fisher frowned. "But Dinah said you looked strange, that you didn't answer when she called." "I must have been deep in prayer, sir. Perhaps I did not hear her." Thomas stepped closer, scrutinizing her face. "You should have asked permission before leaving the grounds. It was dangerous and foolish." "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir." Thomas turned to Fisher. "Since Dinah raised the alarm, we should still search the riverbank. Someone else may be missing. Take the man. Search the area where Rose says she walked. Look for any signs of trouble." Rose's heart thudded, but she kept her expression still. This was it. If they found the stage scene in the journal, the trap would spring shut. If they found nothing, her plan was finished. Fisher led several men toward the river. Rose waited in the hallway beside Thomas. Catherine descended the stairs with a shawl wrapped tight around her, her eyes darting between them in dawning comprehension. 20 minutes later, Fisher returned, carrying something wrapped in oilcloth. "Mr. Hartwell," he said, voice unsteady. "We found this on the riverbank." hidden beneath brush. And there were signs someone was there recently. Torn fabric, disturbed mud. It looks like there was a struggle, or someone fell. Thomas reached for the oilcloth, but Fisher pulled it back slightly. "Sir," he said, "I believe we should call the sheriff. There's something inside this. A book, maybe a journal. And the scene, it doesn't look like a simple walk. It looks like something happened." "Give me that," Thomas barked. Fisher hesitated. In that moment, Rose felt a shift in the air, small but seismic. Fisher was not Southern-born. He did not instinctively bow to planter hierarchy. His instincts told him something was wrong, and he trusted them. "I think we should wait for the sheriff, sir," Fisher repeated. "If something has happened to one of your slaves, there should be a proper investigation." "Do not be absurd," Thomas snapped. "Rose is standing right here. Clearly she is fine. Give me the journal so we can determine what foolishness caused this chaos." But Fisher had already unwrapped the oilcloth. He stared at the first page. His face drained of color. "Mr. Hartwell," he whispered, "this journal. This describes events from 10 years ago. It mentions a woman named Louisa." Thomas lunged forward, snatching the journal with sudden violence. But Fisher had read enough, and so had the room. "That journal belongs to me," Thomas said sharply. "It is private property. You had no right to read it. Rose, come with me to my study. We need to discuss your unauthorized writings about my family." "No," Fisher said. The single word dropped into the hallway, like a stone into a still pond. Thomas turned slowly. "What did you say?" "I said no, sir," Fisher replied, squaring his shoulders. "Something is not right here. This journal describes serious accusations. I think the sheriff should read it." "You forget yourself, Fisher," Thomas snapped. "I am your employer. You will do as I say." "I am your employee, not your property," Fisher replied, his accent sharpening with conviction. "And I am also a human being with a conscience. That journal describes a murder. If there's even a chance its accusations are true, they must be investigated." Thomas's refined mask cracked. "The accusations of fantasies of an enslaved woman poisoned by northern ideas," he said sharply. "She has written lies to cause trouble, perhaps hoping for leniency, a lighter workload, maybe even freedom. The journal is worthless." "Then you will not object," Fisher said, "if the sheriff determines that. I will not have my reputation subjected to investigation based on the ravings of a slave," Thomas hissed. Rose watched him unravel. She had known this would happen, that his desperation to silence the truth would expose him more completely than the accusations themselves. Catherine stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "The journal is not lies. Rose recorded what I told her about my sister, Louisa's death. I have lived with doubts for 10 years. I believe the truth should be examined." Thomas's head whipped toward his wife, and the look he gave her was terrifying. "Catherine, you are unwell. You do not know what you are saying. Return to your room at once." "No," Catherine said, and her voice carried a strength Rose had never heard before. "I will not be silent anymore. Mr. Fisher, please send for the sheriff. I will testify about what I know regarding my sister's death. Let Thomas explain why what happened to Louisa resembles what Rose has documented." Silence, deep, heavy, filled the hallway. Then Thomas laughed, a sharp, humorless bark. "You are all fools. Do you really think anyone will care what an enslaved woman wrote? Or what my wife says while under laudanum? I am Thomas Hartwell. My family has been respected in Burke County for 3 generations. I will simply say Rose attempted to run away and invented lies to excuse her behavior. And you, Fisher, you overstepped your place by indulging this nonsense. No one will believe any of you over me." Rose felt a cold clarity settle over her. He was right, partially. In 1851 Georgia, society would rally around a white planter before believing an enslaved woman, a foreign overseer, or a wife rumored to be hysterical. But she had prepared for this. Well, Rose said softly. There is someone else who might be interested in the journal. Thomas's head jerked toward her. Your cotton factor, Mr. Hayes. Rose continued smoothly, was concerned last month about discrepancies in your shipping records. And your neighbor, Mr. Crawford, mentioned to Mrs. Hartwell that you borrowed a large sum you have not repaid. Thomas went still. Rose held his gaze. I wonder what they would think, she said. If they learned you may have murdered your first fiancée for her inheritance, then married her sister for the same reason. I wonder if they will continue to trust you with their business and money. Thomas's face drained and flushed with rage. You have been spying on my financial affairs. I have been listening, sir, Rose replied. That is what enslaved people do. We are invisible to white men during their important conversations. So we hear everything, and I have written everything in that journal, including details of your debts and your questionable accounts. Even if the sheriff does not care about Louisa's death, your associates may care a great deal about your dishonesty. This was a real threat. Southern society might excuse a man for killing women. Tragic accident happened, after all, but financial breaches were unforgivable. A planter who could not be trusted threatened the entire system of credit and reputation that held the South together. You are insane, Thomas said, but conviction was gone. All of you are insane. This is conspiracy and defamation. Then let the sheriff read the journal, Fisher said firmly. Let him investigate. If it is all lies, you will be vindicated. Thomas looked around the hallway and saw his world collapsing. His wife against him, his overseer refusing obedience, an enslaved woman documenting his crimes, and his financial secrets teetering on the edge of exposure. Rose watched him decide violence. His hand slipped toward the pistol hidden in his coat. Fisher saw it too. He moved immediately, stepping in front of Rose and Catherine. Do not do anything foolish, Mr. Hartwell, he warned. The men outside heard shouting. If something happens now, it will only confirm suspicion. Thomas's hand stopped. He was trapped, and he knew it. Get out, he whispered. His voice hollowed. Fisher, you are dismissed. Rose, you are sold. I will have the papers drawn up today. Catherine, you will return to Charleston to your father. I want none of you here. Fisher still held the journal. Take it, Thomas spat. Take it to the sheriff. Take it to my neighbors. Take it to anyone. No court will convict a white man based on slaves' accusations. And no one will believe my wife over me. All you will accomplish is your own ruin. He turned sharply and retreated to his study, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. Rose, Fisher, and Catherine remained in the hallway. What happens now? Catherine asked quietly. Fisher looked at the leather-bound journal in his hands. I take this to the sheriff, he said. Whether he investigates or not, it will at least be recorded. And Mr. Hartwell was right about one thing. I no longer have employment here, but I will not work for a man I believe to be a murderer. What about Rose? Catherine asked. Fisher met Rose's eyes. There was respect there, genuine and new. He said, you are sold, Fisher said. But until the papers are signed and a trader arrives, you remain here. I suggest you sleep in the main house tonight, not your cabin. Stay close to others at all times. A man who has lost everything becomes the most dangerous kind. Over the next days, Fisher's warning proved true. Thomas did not leave his study. Meals were brought to him and left untouched. He summoned his lawyer, his business partners, his father's old acquaintances. Men came and went with grim, tight expressions. Something irreversible was unfolding behind that study door, holding long, urgent conversations behind closed doors. The sheriff did come. Sheriff Daniels, a stout man who had known Thomas since boyhood. He read select portions of Rose's journal, questioned Fisher and Catherine, and inspected the riverbank. His conclusion was predictable. There was insufficient evidence to pursue charges against Thomas Hartwell. Rose's journal was interesting, he said, but legally meaningless because it was written by an enslaved woman. Catherine's testimony about Louisa was considered hearsay from a decade-old tragedy. The disturbed earth by the river proved only that someone had been there, not what had happened. But the true damage came elsewhere. News spread through Burke County society with the speed of fire through dry fields. Whispers could not be contained. Thomas Hartwell's wife had accused him of murder. An enslaved woman had written a damning record. His overseer had defied him. Even without legal consequences, Thomas's reputation collapsed. Business partners distanced themselves. Social invitations dried up. Creditors grew wary. Within 3 weeks, Thomas sold his plantation to a consortium of Savannah investors and fled to Texas, where land was cheap and questions were few. Catherine and her children returned to Charleston. Rose learned months later that Catherine had successfully petitioned her father to annul the marriage on grounds of mental cruelty and suspected violence. As for Rose, Thomas had signed documents selling her to a trader bound for New Orleans. But the sale fell apart when the trader learned of Rose's habit of writing journals. No one wanted an enslaved woman who recorded her owner's secrets. Instead, Fisher intervened, using his savings and with financial assistance from Catherine's father, who seemed desperate to atone for his role in the tragedy. Fisher purchased Rose's freedom. Her manumission papers were filed in Burke County in July of 1851. "I cannot undo what was done to you," Fisher told her the day she received them. "But I can acknowledge that you were right, that you saved yourself and Mrs. Hartwell through courage and intelligence few could have summoned. You deserve freedom. I hope you use it well." Rose held the papers, feeling their weight. They were not justice. True justice would have seen Thomas Hartwell hanged for Louisa's death. True justice would have freed every enslaved person. True justice would have dismantled the entire monstrous system. But the papers were survival, and sometimes survival was its own form of victory. She traveled north to Philadelphia, where the Quaker family who had once educated her welcomed her back and helped her find work and a place to live. She continued writing, not just the crimes of individual masters, but the entire machinery of bondage, the ways it damaged every soul it touched, enslaved and enslaver alike. Years later, when the Civil War came and emancipation with it, Rose would think back to that spring in Georgia. She remembered Catherine's bravery in finally speaking truth, Fisher's decision to value conscience over security, her own gamble that could easily have cost her life. The cabin where Rose had lived remained standing on the abandoned Hartwell property for many years, weathered and collapsing. Locals said it was haunted by the woman who lived there before, by Rose, the one who had disappeared without a trace. They claimed that on quiet nights, crying drifted from the empty walls. But Rose knew the truth. The cabin wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by the living, by all the women who had suffered there, by secrets long buried to protect a society built on lies and violence. The journal that changed everything was preserved among Catherine's family papers. Decades later, historians discovered it and marveled at the clear-eyed resolve of a woman who wielded truth as her only weapon, her only means of survival in an impossible landscape. What they found in Rose's beautifully furnished cabin was not comfort or privilege. It was evidence of obsession, of coercion, of a man trying to recreate and control a woman he had already destroyed. And what they found, ultimately, was proof that even in bondage, even under the shadow of murderous power, the human spirit can fight back with intelligence and will. Rose lived until 1889, long enough to see slavery end, long enough to witness the South transformed by war and Reconstruction, long enough to record her story for generations to come. She never returned to Georgia, but she never forgot the lessons learned in that isolated cabin by the Savannah River. The most important lesson was this: evil often wears a civilized face, polished manners, soft words, respectable charm. But evil can be defeated, not always through force, not always through the law, but sometimes through the quiet courage of those who refuse to be silenced, who write the truth, who document the hidden things, who bear witness even when witness itself is dangerous. Rose's story became one small thread in the vast tapestry of resistance to slavery, reminding future generations that power is never absolute, that the oppressed are never truly powerless, and that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the world is simply refusing to forget